Hi, my name is Martin Purnell, and welcome to Off-Grid Christianity, a weekly podcast for those who go or don't go to church and where we can meet and hear from those that have made their faith count. The podcast series is to encourage via conversation and not necessarily change your mind prior to listening. You can contact us as well by email, ogc@accessradio.biz. Our email address again is ogc@accessradio.biz. So please welcome today's guest, who is a published author and co-founder of Men Alive, as well as receiving many business awards in Australia, where he resides. So why did he sell his primary manufacturing business to focus on his new ministry? What was it like to go from business owner to a full-time volunteer? What did his family think? What is the purpose of Men Alive? How do you encourage men to become an active force for renewal in the church? What is his book, How to Grow a Men's Ministry, about? And what has he learnt about himself and his faith journey with Jesus since the start of Men Alive? All these questions, so many to ask, and hopefully some great answers as well. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Robert Falzon. Robert, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. For those that don't know who you are, we'll find out in a minute. But where are you based, good sir?
Brisbane, Australia.
Wonderful. Now, over here, we've got ice and snow. So just to wind me up a bit more, what's the weather like in Brisbane at the moment?
Well, it's about 30 degrees most days during the day, and in the evening it gets down to about 20. Most of the time in this season it's blue skies, but actually right now there's a storm raging outside and plenty of water and rain and wind. But it's okay.
You can cope with all that sun and sun that I don't currently have.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. It's a hard place to live in.
I bet it is.
For my sins, I live here.
So let's go for it then, good sir. That's 5 questions to ask you so we can get a better understanding of who you are, Robert, if that's okay.
Sure.
Question number 1. If you could invite anybody from history for an evening meal, alive or dead, so that you could ask them questions, who would it be?
Well, I thought about it for a while. I had a whole list of people. And I thought, one of the characters in the Bible history, one of the characters that I really am curious about is John the Baptist.
Ah.
I would like to ask him to dinner.
Now, obviously, he might not be interested in kangaroo meat on the barbie. You never know, though. He might be interested in a barbie. So what would you serve him and what kind of questions would you ask him?
Yeah, well, he's a Jew. I'd probably roast up a lamb.
Very good.
A couple of veggies and a bottle of red wine.
Yes.
I like him as a character. I like him as the pivot from the New Old Testament to the New Testament. I really like that he was a relative of Jesus. I really like the idea that 700 years before John the Baptist, the prophet Isaiah prophesied that there would be a voice in the wilderness. Yeah. So John the Baptist.
And your opening question to find out more about John when he was there with you, what would be your opening gambit question?
Did Elizabeth ever talk to you about the angel Gabriel coming to see her? There's very little written in these scriptures at all. I'm sure there was a fair bit of conversation there.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. Well, if I can organise it, let me know what the answer is, will you?
Yes. Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I'll put on a good feast for him.
I'm sure you will. Thank you. Question 2. Who is your favourite biblical character or favourite biblical story or favourite parable, please, Robert?
This one is one of my favourites. It wasn't hard to choose because I use it a lot. And it's the story of the prodigal son.
Ah, tell me more.
It's a parable. It's probably not a real-life story, but it makes it real-life God for us because the father in the story is the representative of God and heaven and the father. The prodigal son, which is where I place myself in the story, and many people do. The prodigal son, he's gone out to the wide world and he's ended up in the pig pen, but he was in a variety. I'm sure he was in a variety of seedier places before the pig pen. And he comes to his senses and he starts to head back to his dad. I imagine, when I imagine that scene, that every day from the day that the son left home, the dad would get up, do his chores and do his prayers, and then he would sit by the window looking and waiting. So I don't know how many years the prodigal was away, but it was long enough for any human being to give up.
Yes.
But the father was there and he was looking every day, looking. The prodigal comes over the horizon and you see the prodigal over the horizon and dad's looking through the window and And the story basically tells us that the father runs to him.
Yes.
Now, a Jewish elderly man, in the 600 or 700 precepts of the rules of the Jewish faith, a man should not lift his garment and run.
Okay.
He breaks the rules for his son. And he runs. It says he runs. To run, because you're not supposed to show your ankles. To run, he has to pull his garment up. Surely that's what would happen. And in doing so, and running, he's breaking all these rules. And even worse, the son comes from the pig pen.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know whether I can say a rude word on this podcast.
If it's that rude, I'll go beep.
Yeah. He's probably, the prodigal son,
smells a bit.
Smells like pig.
Beep.
What happens is this in the story, and this is a parable, right? It's the parable to explain something about the nature of God. The father runs to his son, and in the text it suggests that the father runs straight into his son and puts his arms around him.
Yes.
He didn't stop and go, "Oh, you stink." Or, "Where the hell have you been?"
Yeah.
Nothing like that. Just loving embrace. Just loving embrace. He kisses him. So much love. So much love. Most of us listening to the podcast are sons and daughters. Most of us had fathers who never knew how to be a father, and some of them did really good jobs and some of them did not.
Yes.
All of us would like a father to leave their houses and leave their places of comfort and run to us, to find us, to save us, and to show love to us.
That is a brilliant answer. Thank you very much indeed. And no doubt that is going to be used later on in the interview when you talk about men alive, because I'm sure, as you gave us a brief understanding at the beginning, you use this parable quite a lot. So that'd be great. Okay, question 3. This would be very interesting because of all the political turmoil that's going on, I think, in Australia, because you have a different Prime Minister every week, don't you? Is that right? Something like that?
Yes, we do.
If you're Prime Minister for the day and could change any law or impose a new law, what would it be?
It's complicated because it's all connected with one of my major themes, and that is fathers. The rule that I would change is we don't know what to do with these young men who rage against society, steal cars. In the United States, they use guns. In Australia, they use cars as their weapons, and kill people and maim people and make a terrible mess of society. And these young men are raging against fatherlessness and raging against a law that doesn't have any justice for these young people. They're usually young men. I would like to think that what we could do is give them something meaningful to do. And there is lots of orchards and farms in Australia. And we could build work camps. We could put these young people in them for a certain amount of time, rather than putting them in jail and learning from the people to come out worse. Give them something meaningful to do. At the end of their time, give them some money for their time that they've worked in the workplaces. Give them some discipline and put some decent male examples into those places and teach them how to be men and women. Keep the women separate, and I would try to find a way to create laws that would give decent discipline and punishment for the crimes, but also give them worthy work to do each day and earn their dignity.
Great answer. Can you see it going through your parliament?
We have what we call the Army Reserves here. I don't know whether you have anything similar over there.
Yeah. Territorial Army, that sort of thing. Army Reserve, yep.
Army Reserves. They don't have much to do most of the time. And we could give the Army Reserves the task of running these young men and giving them models to live by and rules to live by. I'm waiting for the government to change before I go and knock on somebody's door and say, "Hey, guys, look, I know nothing, but I just wanted to share some things with you."
Yeah, but if you were Prime Minister, you could just put it through. Wouldn't be a problem, would it? Or would it?
If I was the Prime Minister I would put it through.
Without any issues at all.
I would find a way. Well,
it's a great answer. Good luck with that.
I'll let you know.
Yeah, please do. I won't hold my breath on that one. I just got a feeling that there'll be too many stumbling blocks to overcome.
You never know.
If you don't try,
Yeah.
well, the biggest stumbling block of all is, of course, you're not Prime Minister yet. So you have to work on that one, first of all. But yes, I look forward to the outcome, Robert. Thank you. So outside of family events, what has been your most enjoyable day out so far, please, sir?
There's so many. And I thought to myself, well, there's some of the most enjoyable, sort of almost the most bland. So I picked this one because it's dramatic.
Oh, good. Do we need a full-blown string orchestra in the background to give some more melodrama?
Definitely. My wife and I went to Antarctica about 2 years ago. We wanted to follow the Ernest Shackleton journey.
Ah.
And we did that in the Drake Passage, which can be quite wild, but towards the South Pole, they stop the boat. They lift up the back of the boat, so there's this platform. And for anybody who wants to, they give you the opportunity to do a polar plunge.
No.
You should laugh, yeah, because the water's about -10 or something like that, maybe even colder than that. You put your swimmers on.
What, swimmers as in a full-blown wetsuit, dry suit, or just your swim?
No, a pair of shorts. Yeah, keep laughing because it is funny. They tie a rope around you.
Yes.
Around your waist, so that if you jump in and you go unconscious, they can pull you out and resuscitate you.
Oh, I'd love to see the health and safety risk assessment for this. This is brilliant.
and you know, not everybody does it.
I'm not surprised.
And I did it, and it was.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. There is some film footage of it.
Oh, wow. So before you get to the punchline, then. Or maybe that was it. What was it like thinking, no, I've already got to jump in. What was going through your mind at the time when you're on the platform?
I was going to say, well, the 2 or 3 guys that went before me didn't die, so I probably won't die.
Right.
So I jumped. But it does take your breath away.
Yeah, apparently so, yeah.
And it changes your voice.
More descant.
That's right.
You went falsetto.
You go from a baritone to a falsetto, yeah.
Yeah.
But that was an enjoyable time and an adventure.
That's amazing. How long were you in the water for?
I don't know. Maybe 12 to 15 seconds.
This is exaggerated. Oh, about 15 minutes. You know, I swam around an iceberg or two and...
A couple of orcas jumped on my leg and yeah.
Brilliant, yes. Let's not sensationalise it too much. Just make it one orca.
One orca, yeah.
Wonderful. You got out. Can I just say, I wouldn't have done it, but brilliant. I'd love to see the film.
Because you're a sensible man.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. Go with that. Yes, wisdom, I think it's called. But you see, you had me when you said Shackleton, because Shackleton obviously came from Northern Ireland, where I now reside. And it is a phenomenal story. Obviously, you didn't get to South Pole because, Shackleton didn't either. How much of the Shackleton journey did you actually do?
Probably 70% of it.
Really?
At the end of every day, they would do a recap and they would say, here's where you went. And there's the Shackleton shed, and we parked a boat here, and you walked to there. What happened there was this, and this. 3 men died because it was freezing cold. And then the next time we'd go around an iceberg and end up in another place. And then in the evening, they'd tell the story, and they'd say, this is where we took you, and this is where Shackleton went. And then this is where Shackleton left the larger party, and he took this boat, and he went on and found the cove, and ate the dogs and all of that. And that's where we went there today. And the story is amazing.
Oh, no, it's incredible.
Yeah, like when he was recruiting, this is in the middle of the war when he was recruiting, he put an ad in the whatever the paper is that's in that region. And
the Times was probably, yeah.
Yeah, and the ad said something like, men wanted for dangerous and hazardous journey. Return possible. Thousands of people try to get to do the job. He only needed about 30 or 40 or something. I don't know how many it was in the end. You know, I admired that tenacity.
I know we're diversifying a bit, but there was an incredible program on Channel 4 TV here about 10, 15 years ago now, where they tried to recreate the Shackleton journey using slightly modern techniques. And it was mainly done, I think, by the Royal Marines. I took note of the Shackleton whiskey that was found over there because somebody else has tried to recreate it. So that was quite an interesting story. But for me, it's like the two parties, one of the parties that was staying on Antarctica, they had to find a wall of snow. That's the best way of describing it. And they just huddled up there for 3 days whilst the storm just completely besieged them.
Yeah.
Please go onto Wikipedia or whatever and see what happens next, because I think it was Elephant Island, wasn't it, where didn't they set off from?
Yeah, that's right.
And all he knew was that if he went north, he might be able to get to the Falkland Islands, or South Georgia in this case. Yeah, how he achieved that in such a small boat. And then, of course, when they get to South Georgia, you think, oh, wow, it's a waiting station. There better be people there. But the only way they could get to South Georgia was to go to the north of the island. And then somehow they had to climb over the mountain to go and get help. I mean, it is just an incredible story. Some people might say, well, no, it was foolhardy. No, sorry, this is more than just a boy's own adventure. It is incredible. Did you go to South Georgia?
No, we didn't get the full way, but we had a tremendous time.
I bet. That's just a wonderful trip. Thank you for sharing that. Wow, slightly envious. Question 5. What has been your most embarrassing moment then, please, apart from the falsetto voice when you got out?
There are so many, but I'll tell you this one. My wife and I did a journey to Spain and Portugal 5 years ago. We hired a car, and when we were in Lisbon, we met our Airbnb guy, and the Airbnb guy took us to the apartment, and then he said, "Oh, you can't park the car at the apartment. We have to go down to the parking lot." I said, "Oh, fine, let's go and do that." We took our gear in. I get in our car, and he gets in our car. We drive to the car park. Park the car, and he goes, and I come out of the car park, and I start walking, and I can't find my apartment. I don't know what the apartment's called. I don't know the street the apartment's in. My phone is not working in that region. So I'm walking round and round and round and round and round looking for the apartment. I have no idea where the apartment is. At the end, I go to McDonald's to try to get some Wi-Fi. That didn't work. So across the road from McDonald's was a pub, and I went into the pub and I said, "I don't think you're going to laugh your head off with me. I don't know where I live." He says, "You're an Australian. You're really lost." And I said, "Look, I can tell you what the apartment looks like. I can tell you that one of the apartment windows you can see the water." And he said, "Look, I think I know where that is. You just go down here 2 streets, turn left, go up the hill, keep going up the hill, come around the hill, and when you get there, I think that's the apartment." Anyway, my wife has gone mad because she thinks I've been captured and sold into slavery. And she's standing outside the apartment, so everything was good. But I felt that was quite embarrassing. I felt I was terribly lost at a place that I had no idea what I was doing, and most people didn't speak my language.
But you see, that was almost a mini Shackleton moment, wasn't it? Miles from home. You had to get to your apartment. What were you going to do? Go to a pub, ask for directions with your description. Yes, it is a mini Shackleton, that's very good.
Yeah, and they were having a bit of a laugh in the pub. The guy gave his mate behind the bar a little nudge and says, "You're like crazy."
Well, at least he spoke English, which was something.
Yeah, that's right.
And of course, your wife, was she mad because you got back, or she was mad because you got lost? One of the two.
No, she was worried.
Sold to slavery.
Yeah.
So let's go for who Robert Falzon really is, if that's all right, sir. Thank you so much. I did mention at the very beginning that you had a manufacturing business. What was that? My
parents moved from Perth, where I was born, and I left home when I was 17, and I thought I had a vocation to the priesthood, Catholic priesthood.
Oh, wow.
I spent a couple of years in the seminary and did my academic studies at Newcastle University, which is I left the seminary, finished my degree, and while I was there, my mum and dad moved to Brisbane. So instead of me going from Newcastle back to Perth, I went to Brisbane. Mum and dad didn't have money, so they said, if you're going to stay here, you've got to get a job.
Yeah.
I got a job working with a furniture manufacturer, and the furniture manufacturer was sort of like quality furniture, and I was trying to sell stuff to people and designers, and then there was a recession during that time, and the people who owned the furniture manufacturing business closed it down. Some of the senior leaders of the furniture company came to me and said, "Hey, you seem like you're a reasonable fellow. Do you think you could resurrect this business?" So I said, "Oh, look, I'll give it a go. Let's see how we go. If you want to give it a go, I'll give it a go. We'll see what happens." And I did that for about 15, nearly 20 years. And we rode the tourist boom with the Japanese coming into Australia. And all the fine hotels that they were building, and we made lots of furniture for all of those hotels and the Sheratons and all those hotels. And when the recession came and there was no hotels going, I got a phone call one Friday afternoon from a guy from New Zealand who said to me, I've got a project for you and I'd like you to come to New Zealand on Monday to have a look at the job. It's a 65-metre yacht that we need to furnish.
Ooh.
I went to New Zealand. I priced the project and I won the project. Then the owner of the ship said, no, we're not going to be doing the fit out in New Zealand. We're going to be doing it in Trinity Yachts in New Orleans in United States of America. They took the hull over to there, and I sent 30 guys over there, and we built a whole pile of furniture for this boat, fitted it into this boat, and it was absolutely beautiful. And so we were in the marine business. And then after a few years and a many number of boats, the public company came and made an offer to buy my business, and I sold my business to them, and I started Men Alive.
Ah.
I started Men Alive in 2003.
Well, what you don't know is that 65-metre yacht that you put all the furniture in, that was actually my yacht. You did a cracking job. It was very nice.
I'm glad I went to a worthy person.
Do you know who actually it belonged to?
He owned a large trading company, and they owned a lot of chemist shops and some stationery shops.
Well, I'm sure if you still got it, you must be enjoying the furniture as well still.
Yeah.
That's interesting that you've gone then and sold your business. What was it like from day one day having a really nice job to then becoming a full-time volunteer, getting no payment? What do you remember of that time?
It was a pretty pivotal time for me because I had this vocation, I thought, to become a priest. And then I had my wayward and loose years. And then I got married, and then I just got immersed in work and 4 children. And I lost who I was. I didn't know who I was. I knew that I was good at doing things.
Yeah.
But if your only definition of your humanity is the things that you do, it's not a happy definition, because there's a lot more to the interior man than there is in just in what you do. I was unhappy with who I was, and I really didn't know anything about the spiritual journey. I knew there was God, I believed in God, and I knew that I had some kind of call, but I didn't understand it at all.
Yeah.
Do you know the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, Gaudi's great masterpiece?
I've never been there, but I know what you mean, yeah.
I went to Sagrada Familia, and that's 1996. If you go to Sagrada Familia now, there'll be 1 million people outside the doors waiting to get into the place.
Yes.
When I went there, it was just this ruins, nothing. And I was doing work, and I went to the Sagrada Familia, and I was walking around. I was the only person in it. And this might sound weird to you and your listeners, but, this is a Christian program, and I believe that, I believe because it's happened to me. I was in this building, and it wasn't really a building. There was some stones and stuff, and I'm walking around. And while I'm walking around, I hear an interior voice, and the voice says to me, "What do you see?" I don't know. It's a building it's just been neglected and it's falling down. So I'm walking around a bit more, and I hear this voice again, "What do you see?" And I say the same answer. And then as I'm going out, I'm in the doorway of going out, I hear the voice again, but this time the voice says to me, "Robert, what do you see?" I said, "I told you, a building that's falling down." And the voice said to me, "This is not a building that's fallen down. It's a building under construction. Will you join the team that will rebuild this church?" I said, "I don't know anything about that stuff." I go home, I tell my wife, and she says, "Well, you've got to sell your business first before you can go and do any of your wild adventures." But she was quite
supportive.
Yeah, that's the word. Thank you. I was struggling for the right word. And I went to a conference in Chicago where there was a leadership summit thing, and I thought I might go and learn some stuff. So I go there. There was 40,000 people at this summit, and they all fit in this one major auditorium, which was a evangelical church during the evenings and an auditorium for this conference during the day. And the very first day, I'm sitting about 100 rows back on the end, just in case it got weird and I could run away.
Good thinking.
And this is in Chicago at Willow Creek. And the guy who was running the event, he comes out the front and he's standing there and he's egging up the people and engaging with them. And then he says, "Are you guys," this is men and women, but in America they call everybody guys, "Are you guys going to give your life for destiny or dollars?" And then he goes, "Destiny or dollars?" And then he walks across the front of the stage and walks back in dramatic fashion. And then he comes over to the side of the stage, which is closer to me. And then with his finger pointed out, and he points 100 rows back on the end straight at me. And he says, "Are you going to give your life for destinies or dollars?" I came home, sold the business. I went to the Archbishop of Brisbane, knocked on his door, and I said, "Your Grace, Archbishop John, what are you going to do about all these parishes where there's no people in the churches?" And I was sitting in Mass on Sunday, and there was hardly any men, and it was mostly women, and most of them had grey hair.
Yeah.
And your listeners will probably laugh when you hear that, like you did, because it's the same congregations that you guys are in. They're mostly women with grey hair and a few men, at least in the mainstream churches. And I said, "What are you going to do about it, Your Grace? It's a disgrace, Your Grace." I said, "Where are all the men?" I said, "What are you going to do about it?" And he looked at me like, I've had some interesting characters in my office, but here's this one. He said, no, Robert, I'm not going to do anything about it. You're going to do it.
Hey.
You're going to do it. Go away and do something. And in a year's time, come back and tell me what you've done. So I started Men Alive. I gathered three, four, five guys together and myself. We started running men's missions in parishes all around Australia. We've done 500 missions in Australia and New Zealand and Uganda for 35,000 men in that time.
Wow. I want to delve deeper, if that's okay. Let me go back to that time there where, yes, okay, it's brilliant to be able to build a business from nothing and get some money behind you, and then a public fund comes in and buys you out. But you still have to make that decision as to whether to carry on enjoying life and getting another job, or in your case, going full-time volunteer for something that you believe God is wanting you to do.
Yeah.
You had a supportive wife. But what do you actually remember about that time, or that decision you had to make about finances and everything else like that?
I was a bit crazy, really. I got 4 kids at school, beautiful wife, and I sell my business, and I go home one day and I say, "This is what I want to do. This is what I'm called to do." And, it wasn't just like, "Oh, yes, darling, you could go and do this. This is no problem."
Yeah.
There's a negotiation that goes on with all the parties that are involved. And I had no idea what it would entail. Did the apostles have any idea what Jesus was asking them to do? No. They're fishermen. They had no idea. One of the things I had to do was convince a parish priest to let us come and do our first event. And we had to create a program, and all that we knew was what we needed to happen in ourselves. So what we did was write a program for us,
yes,
men's program. And, you can't stand out the front and do theology for men for two and a half days. We just knew that. We knew that the homilies in our churches weren't enough. So we started to do a program, and we had some talented people. We did an event. It got in one of the religious papers, and the phone rang for about a month, and we had like 7 bookings all around the country. We didn't have any idea how to negotiate money and stuff like that. And we'd go to the parishes and they say, "Oh, we don't have any money." And we said, "Oh, too bad, we'll do it anyway." So 23 years without drawing a wage. Just do some mathematics.
Yeah.
Just some mathematics, 23 years, and if you're earning 100 grand, that's 2.3 million. Well, I didn't get 2.3 million. I got a bit, but I didn't get that much. So somewhere in the mystery of all of this, there's been a multiplication of bread for us and for those that we've gone to. One of the things we started to learn about was that fatherhood is an absolute central issue. in our churches and in our world. And many men were not raised well. Some abused and brutalized. So I wrote How to Grow a Men's Ministry, which is this book here. There's about 5,000 of those out around about. And then I thought there must be some data. So the Americans are great with data. So this book, The Father Factor, this book is all the science around historically how you could be a better father. How you can be a better father, but science. It's the science around it. There's very little faith about that. Dr. Peter O'Shea's just summarised that. But we knew that men loved stories.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you do your podcast, because everybody gives you a story, and the stories are what captures the audience, not the heroics, not the 35,000 people and you sold your business and all that. None of that. They like the stories. So what I did was captured a whole pile of stories of men's lives, ordinary men's lives, and their stories in raising fathers. And then we put a program around that, and we go to the schools. The schools is the pioneering frontier for evangelization, not the parishes, because there's nobody in the parishes.
Yeah.
Not many anyway. The schools are where all the people are and all the families are. The way to reach those people are to reach them through the stakeholders, which are the parents, fathers and wives, and reach the dads. So we run these raising fathers evenings all around the country.
You just said 23 years you've been doing this, from the time you made that decision to sell your business. You still have to take the first step forward, not knowing where you're going to get the money from. You took a step forward. You had the guts to go in and see the Archbishop. And fair play to the Archbishop for just batting it back to you. Some people might say, oh, he was dodging a bullet. No, actually, what he was doing was more than that. He was facilitating and getting you off your backside to do something about it, which is absolutely brilliant. But you went with it. And 23 years on, you're still surviving, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, if we did our own data, as I say, my son will say data, but it's the same thing. If we take our own data from the people that come to your Men Alive meetings now, what is the overriding theme as to why they're turning up in the first place?
Yeah, so I think most men will come due to curiosity, or they would just say, none of this is working for me, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. There might be something in this thing. And the parish events, they come very sheepishly, mostly sent by their wives.
Yeah.
And in a day and a half, they make incredible friends. They learn to tell their story. Everybody has a story. We teach them to learn how to do their story. And mostly what we do is tell our stories of encounter, our stories of growing up, our stories of becoming, in some ways, better men, better husbands, better fathers, and challenge them and give them some tools to go and do that themselves. And, every father and mother who has children, the domestic church is their homes.
Yeah.
And the father and mother are the missionaries in their home. Who taught you? How many children have you got?
One.
Who taught you how to raise that, boy or girl?
It's a boy.
Nobody taught you how to raise.
No.
And probably some of your training was terrible. Maybe.
If we brought him in now, he'd say, how long have you got? I think it would be the first question he would ask. But yeah, and in my case, it was slightly compounded by the fact I had a very sick, ill wife who by this time was registered blind as well. So I had to do 2 jobs in one. And as I say to people, yeah, I must have missed that day at school where there was training on how to be a father, how to be a mother, all that stuff. I missed that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the most important thing human beings can do. The most important. We call the priest in our churches father, or whatever you call it in England. And they don't know how to be fathers. They're not fathers. They will give us some spiritual direction. But, Dad wants to know, how does, Sam, who's now 17 and is starting to date, what am I supposed to say to him about this, And we're all still experimenting, generational experimenting.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I'd like to know more about yourself now, if that's okay, as we get towards the tail end of this podcast. And looking back on those past 23 years, from when you started to where you are now, what have you learned about yourself and your faith journey to date? And let's put Jesus in the mix as well on this one. What have you learned?
I can't answer that question without another 30 minutes, but I'll just tell you these couple of things.
Yeah.
I am a person who likes to do stuff, but that's not enough. You know, Jesus just didn't send the disciples out and some of them apostles. He taught them how to pray, and he taught them, and I didn't know how to pray. I knew that God moved in my life, and I knew that there was a calling to do something. And many men wake up in the doing, but the doing can only get you so far. I believe we have to have a relationship with Jesus, an encounter with Jesus. And then we started to create a way of life for the team. We created a way for us to pray as men, which we call SOAP: scripture, observation, application, prayer. It's a way of reading the scriptures. And of the sort of 60 to 70 volunteers now, one of the things that we ask of them is that every day they have at least 30 minutes in prayer, some of it in silence. Because one of the things to growing is awareness of ourselves. If you just keep doing the doing, which I'm very happy to do, but if you don't stop for encounter every day, being filled again every day, to being realigned every day, you can't do it. And I've tried to do it in my own strength, and still sometimes do. But I find that, you know, the next thing, the imagination can create beautiful things, but it can't make them holy things until God gets hold of it. I think for me, to answer your question, is that I've found by stopping every day and being silent and reading the scriptures, I find that Jesus finds me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I find that Jesus finds me. And when Jesus finds me, not only does he give me a job, but he loves me into life, helps me become the better man. And I've got a long way to go, so he's probably going to leave me for about another 20 years. And when I'm really crusty and cranky and use swear words on the podcast, my word to you and to the listeners. And I've said mostly things about males, haven't I? So I'm sorry, ladies. Sorry, I don't mean to exclude you in any way. But some of the domestic heroes are the ladies in the homes who are doing the tough yards, and they're the heroes. A relationship with Jesus will always lead us to learn how to love others. Jesus is calling us to love his sheep, to love others. And as you give yourself away, we become bigger on the inside.
That's something that you've learned over the 23 years. That is a fantastic summary. Thank you. Because you're in Australia, where it's slightly warmer than where I am at the moment, has it gone down with other denominations, you know, and inviting other denominations across to hear what Men Alive is all about?
Yeah. The Anglicans have taken it on reasonably well. And there's a group called Alpha in England.
Yeah, oh yes.
Started in London, and they are in Australia. And they are champions now of men's work. And in the beginning, when other people started to do men's work, I started to be very possessive of our territory.
Yeah.
But I'm feeling now the more the better. The more the better. Give it away. Give it away. You know, like John the Baptist we talked about. He went down to the Jordan, created a new ritual, a cleansing ritual. And they said, "Are you the Christ?" He says, "No, I'm not the Christ. I must decrease and he must increase." Yeah.
You see, what I see from what you're saying at the moment, Robert, and hopefully this is going to encourage so many people out there, where they're at the crossroads and they say, well, I've got nothing to give. I can't do anything. Well, let's have a look at Robert's life. You started off thinking you were going to become Father Brown of the parish world.
Yes, that's it.
But actually, that never really happened because whilst you got a superb training in the scriptures, you never became Father Brown. You then went into business, and through that, you became very successful, but that taught you a business model of which gave you finances so that when Jesus came knocking on the door and said, well, actually, Robert, guess what you're going to be doing? Through the Archbishop saying, hey, you go and do it. You actually unknowingly had a wealth of knowledge and a financial background to go for it. The big question was, could you do it? Could you actually do it? And you did. So for those then that are listening today, and as you might be aware, this seems to be a thread now from previous podcasts that have been going out of late, where people are doing something similar, at the threshold of life, and they then go for it. What would you say to these people?
Yeah, I think if you can have Jesus in your life that's guiding you every day, he will give you a job. And in the process of him giving you a job, a task, a mission, he will work inside you. He will work in the inner man and woman, and he will guide you. He needs hands and feet on the earth to do this job. I've got to say, it's all about being Robert at the moment.
Yeah.
But, there are a whole pile of guys who have also got jobs and other things, and they volunteer 6, 7, 8 events a year and go and do these things, and they're just ordinary laymen. So I would say to your listeners, God has a job for you. And in responding to that job, you will wake up in the doing, and you'll become bigger on the inside, and your heart will open more, and you'll be more filled by God's grace, and he will call you to places and call you to things to do that you never thought you could possibly do. And even now I look at some things and I go, I have no idea, Robert. And many people would say, Robert, you have no idea. But I have no idea, Robert, about what you should be doing, but I'm going to try. And here's part of the puzzle. In the process of me going and doing, it hasn't been, in the end, fully healthy, because I am a doer. And sometimes I need to be someone who sits in silence every day, sits with the scriptures every day. But I want to do something. Slow down, Robert. Slow down for loving union. That would be my last words for you today. Slow down for loving union. Slow down for loving union, and go and do whatever he tells you to do.
Well,
Amen.
Thank you. Well, that reminds me as well, when I was at my crossroads, or one of the first of the 2 major crossroads, where a chap said, look, your brain is a bit like a reservoir with a dam, and your dam is always giving outflow. You're doing bit that you're calling it. That's the dam releasing water to give outflow. But if you don't get inflow, that reservoir will become dry. You won't have any water there. So you have to make sure that as well as giving out, you have to get inflow as well. I think that's what you're saying, isn't it?
Well said, yeah.
Well, for those that want to know more, menalive.org.au is the website address. And before we come to the final question, your next journey then, for the next 20 years that you've already mentioned, where do you think you're going to be going?
Well, I'm nearly 70.
Mere youngster. You can still play cricket for Australia the way things are going, so don't worry.
Yes, and next year the cricket will be at Lord's. And anyway, but what was the question again?
Yeah, it sounds as if you're going to be playing for Australia at Lord's next year. So where do you see yourself going in the next 20 years?
Yeah, I'd like to do something about encouraging grandparents, because the grandparents are the holders of the faith. Many of the fathers, mums and dads are too busy, but the grandparents have got time and they've got faith. So I'd like to do something to encourage grandparents, and I'd like to experiment in thinking about aging and how we could do that gracefully and meaningfully, and not just sit in the chair and watch the midday show. Bring the beauty and grace of aging and make it valuable. I don't know how, I don't know where, and I don't know anything about aging, but most people say I don't know anything about much. Much to do about nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I look forward to coming back to you in a few years' time to see how you're progressing on your next venture. It sounds absolutely fantastic. Robert, final question then, drum roll, please. And that is, Robert Falzon, it has to be somebody that's not in the Bible and dead. Who is your Christian hero, please?
My Christian hero, Francis of Assisi.
Great answer. Why?
The church was in a terrible state, and he saw that the people who were going to church were hungry and not being cared for by the church. Church became very political, and he left a very wealthy, prosperous business with his family. He walked down the hill and he invited a few of his friends to join him. He didn't want to be a priest, and he never was. He just wanted to be one of the people. And he called himself the Poveretto. He had nothing, he didn't own anything, but he loved the people.
What was that word that he called himself?
Poveretto.
Which means?
The poor one. The poor one. And yes, and I've been to Assisi, and the spirit of Francis is powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, a seriously holy man.
What else do you know about him? His
brothers that he gathered around him, they used to call him Frankie as a nickname. So there was affection. There. He didn't want to start an order or a religious community. He just wanted to find ways to feed the poor. And these brothers would walk around the region. They'd stop in a place and they'd kneel and pray. And then where they stopped and kneeled and prayed, they'd bang a little cross in the ground, and then they'd go. He was a man, and he had all the issues that men have, but he fell in love with Jesus, and he did an incredible thing during an era where, he was summoned to Rome by the Pope.
Yes.
And they were going to excommunicate him. You know the story.
I've forgotten, but I know he had to go to Rome.
Yep, he had to go to Rome. The Pope called him to Rome. When he got to Rome, the Pope was going to excommunicate him, and all these guys. Excommunicate means to kick him out of the church. And the Pope had a dream about this beggar, on a vision of this beggar with the church on his back, carrying it. And then when he got to Rome and got to go to the Pope, the person in the Pope's dream that was carrying the church on his back was Francis.
God uses dreams as well, if you're prepared to listen and understand them. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
The reason why I love Francis so much is something that's been attributed to him, and I believe it. He did say it, which is what you're doing as well. Go out and preach the good news to all men in all generations, which we know is the Great Commission.
Yeah.
And he then adds on the tagline, and if all else fails, use words. And I think that is so powerful.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but the reason why he's called Francis is his dad was a successful businessman, obviously in northern Italy, but used to go to France to get all his produce to bring it back.
Yeah.
And so that's why he was christened Francis. If only he'd gone to Scotland, he would have been known as Saint Scotty or something like that.
He could have been called Wass.
No, it's an amazing story. Robert, I could listen to you and learn more from you. Hopefully in a couple of years' time, you'll be able to come back and tell us what's going on with your next venture in looking after the grandparents. That sounds like a fantastic mission field in itself. Robert Falzon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Martin. It's been a blessing. Thank you.
Next time on Off-Grid Christianity.
My wife's Karen's a counsellor, as in not a political one, and I'm her main client, according to her. She would always say to me, you're privileged to be in relationship with many, many people. This isn't quite the word she'd used, but the love you express for them is often in when you call out things you see in them that's not good, because ultimately that will express to them a situation that might point them to freedom, not to being trapped in fear or bad behaviours. And frankly, she's right. And I wish I'd learned that earlier in my life. I'd wish even the little things that I see just make you go, oof, words used, tactics deployed, things asked of you or things asked of others. I just wish I'd called them out a bit more often. And again, to anchor back to your question, mostly that's got nothing to do with money. It's got nothing to do with status. Some of the most snivelly, weaselly, bullying, poor-charactered individuals are often some of the people who just sat in teams trying to protect their job because they think they're clever and it's called politics and what have you. I wish I'd called it out a bit more. I really do.
So please join me and special guest here on Off-Grid Christianity, successful businessman and Christian mentor, Paul Morrish. Until then, cheerio.